Everybody, this is Perch, and I'm responding to a number of emails, a number of questions, and more a number of opinions that you have posted on comments and other things to videos, stuff I've read, people I've talked to, all together. And I want to point out, I think, a problem. And this exists in places certainly more than just comics. But I think with comics, you can draw a really great, clear illustration of where things are jammed up and where we have an actual problem. Um, One of the things that I think, you've seen videos about, I've talked about certainly before, is that a bunch of kind of old fashioned, or I've used the word legacy thinking, is getting us into trouble in comics. And in particular, where this was probably most clearly illustrated was with distribution. We had Diamond. Diamond had run pretty much unopposed for close to 25 years. Uh, and in that time, we saw a significant lack of innovation and improvement. The website was very slow to kind of get moving. They have done some things. There's some good people working over at Diamond, but it clearly hasn't been a top level priority to innovate. In addition, the shipping quality seemed to, I mean, at best, never get better, and at worst, actually, get worse. I think that any company that is lasting for, 20, 30 plus years, you would expect for their systems to improve. You would expect for shipping quality to get better, for packing to improve, for, how returns are handled, how the whole customer service. You expect improvement, and it didn't happen. And in addition to that, the kind of diamond monopoly arguably hurt not just innovation in product, but also where things are distributed, how comics are put out, how comic stores are, and that need to evolve and everything else. And so when DC split from Diamond in 2000, you saw a very aggressive pushback. How dare they? This is killing the industry. This is betrayal. It wasn't about a company or optimization. It was about something personal. It's like The Godfather. This company, DC, wronged all of us in comics by leaving Diamond. And we saw the Back the Comeback and, T-shirts and a campaign, and Jeppy went on a bunch of shows. I should write Jeppy and see if he'll come on this show, but I'm not holding my breath on that one. But anyway, it would be good to kind of have a open and honest dialogue with him about these topics. I don't know that he'd have it. And again, he's a business owner. He can, of course, do what he wants, but that represents sort of the problem. And so you see a lot of people coming and commentate saying, the dime monopoly does need to be broken up. There does need to be change. It's good. People have to move forward and everything else. And you see some agreement within some circles of the comments on that. At the same time, in parallel, you see almost every effort to go to digital blocked by people saying, I will never go to digital. Comics should be printed. That's the way they always should be. Anybody who does this is losing my dollar, my wallet. I refuse. And if you look across the board at all the different things going on in comics, you see a giant patchwork of these inconsistencies. Places where comics is not changing, not evolving. Places where people who work in comics or go to work for new comic companies seek to replicate the exact same business structure, style structure, process that they always have. They're going to go with what's comfortable, even if what's comfortable is 20, 30, 40, 50 years old and clearly needs improvement. You see people who are digging their heels in. You see customers screaming for innovation while at the same time also screaming for things to go back to the way they were, to stay the same, to not evolve. By the way, please, you don't need to come in and say, I'm not one of those people. Yes, there's a vast array of opinions on these topics. My point is that if you're looking at comics and you're thinking, I want to go disrupt this industry, I want to actively change it, I want to bring new models to the table, you're facing very inconsistent headwinds from the publishers, from the creators, and from the customers and the retailers. I mean, we can't leave them out. People think I'm joking when I say this. A lot of retailers aggressively resisted moving to kind of digital cash registers and things like that. Moving to, I was in a retailer summit in the mid 2000s, and there was a guy who's like, I've got one of the carbon paper, put your credit card in and roll that thing across. It's a bunch of people who are like under the age of 40 who have no idea what I'm talking about right now. But where you put your credit card down on this little metal crappy thing and you put a piece of carbon paper on top and you go, and if you go to a lot of jewelers, especially overseas, you'll run into this thing again. But anyway, there's this guy, retailer who's like, I will never move from that ever. That's the way it is. That's the only way to be secure and be safe. I mean, okay. Comic books has a problem, like again, many other industries also have a problem, in that it's clear, I think, to everyone that change is needed, innovation is needed. There needs to be some disruption because right now comic books is on, and this comment is going to disagree with a lot of people. It's on a slow decline. Now wait, you might say, the numbers like Comicron and ICV2, they show that things are going up year after year. Some years, yes, they do, but they're also counting other things in there. They've grown what we're counting as comics. And to be clear, and I've said this in other videos, I think they should. I think they should grow because growth and this change is innovation. It would be smart to do. I think they should do it. Now, I think that they need to be honest about the fact that they're doing it. I think that is another little factor here is you can't add a bunch of things to the pie and then still pretend you're counting in the same way. It's disingenuous to the numbers, but that's an argument for a different time. My point is, yeah, we should be counting comics from news sources. We should be counting crowdfunding and digital and all these other places because that's innovation. That is how it works. I don't have a problem with that. But if you look at the traditional models, meaning the things that aren't changing, we are in a slow decline. And the only way to reverse that is to start doing new things, to whether it's growing a new audience, whether it's getting comics in new places, whether it's going, yes, to digital in some cases, whether it's changing distributors so you get a different model and approach. There's a lot of change that needs to be happening. There's a lot of experimentation that needs to happen. And some of this experimentation will be messy and some will fail. That is disruption. Anytime you're doing something innovative, you run the risk of failure. One of the things that worries me a little bit on a bigger level, outside of comics and everything else, just talking business, is that there is our innovators, our kind of the people who are in businesses trying to make these decisions are increasingly risk averse. They are increasingly they steer away from things that might have a bad outcome. Well, here's the thing. Anytime you're going to disrupt, anytime you're going to create something new, anytime you're going to invent, you're some of the time you are going to have a bad outcome. It's not 100% success. And if you forget that fact and you get to this very conservative, very safe model of building anything, creating anything, you're going to create nothing. At the end of the day, you're going to make and do nothing. And that's I think a very legitimate, very real concern that seems to be increasing. But my point is, this business is full of contradictions. It's full of this very tough problem of we need to make changes. That means we're going to have to adapt to some new things. It's not unlike the music industry, where a lot of people were very comfortable with cassette tapes, and some grudgingly moved to CDs. And then you mean I don't own the music at all? It's a digital file. What does that even mean? Like, how do I? This is normal evolution. I'm not saying it has to be the same. I do think there are definite problems. Whenever I talk about digital comics, somebody brings up you don't own the comic and the owner of the comic can then alter the pages, and that's not right. And you're right, it's not right. I think that, and it's been my very, very hard stance. If a comic is made in 2021 and in 2030 people figure out that, I don't know, something is now offensive that wasn't offensive then, comic books should be left alone. It should be left alone as a time capsule. It should be left alone because that was the original piece of work. We shouldn't retroactively go back and try and alter these things. If it is abhorrent to you, don't buy it, don't keep it, delete it, whatever you happen to do. But don't try and make this situation where you're going to try and constantly police the past. The past is the past. Focus more on the future. But we have to make some changes. And I will tell you, anybody who's trying to navigate this field finds themselves constantly shifting with allies and enemies based on what people want to change and what people want to remain the same. But the reality is everything's going to have to change a little. Everything. If we want this business to survive, and when I say business, I don't mean Marvel. I mean anything comic related, if we want sequential art, if we want this entertainment to continue to grow and thrive and continue, then it's going to need to change. It's going to need to adapt with the times. Clinging on is a different kind of disruption. It's blocking. That's what we're in for. But it is fascinating to me that you will have people who aggressively will point out that people need to move on from Diamond. We've got to get away. We've got to change. And then they will immediately turn around and say, comics really have to be like they were in 1985. And anything else is, should be, bring back Jim Shooter, recreate Marvel. But keep in mind, I like Jim Shooter. I think he did a lot of good. So if Jim Shooter came into Marvel, sounds great. But we do need to figure out ways to move things forward. Running the same playbook from the 80s can be good in some ways. I mean, God, if you could recreate some of those moments as a comic reader who loved that time period, that sounds awesome. But we have to do more than that. It's got to be more than just running a kind of original playbook, a nostalgia play. It's unlikely to have the same results. Might feel good for a little bit of time, but we actually have to get to the part where we actually build forward. So anyway, curious to get your thoughts on it. Let me know in the comments below. Like and subscribe, of course, as always, and thanks for listening.